Hey friends. So after I did my post yesterday, which followed teaching a lesson to a longtime student and which resulted in some really interesting, just strictly musical reminders coming out about how we invest in the intention of the music versus investing in the technique of the music. The next thing that happened to me was I taught another lesson with another longtime student, and we had a wonderful session. She played spectacularly, and at the end of it, she brought up a question of the word deserving, not so much in the context of our lesson, but more just in some of the work that she does with her own clients and in general, as a kind of thought experiment, I suppose, or an investigation into the nature of language. And what is it? What are we saying when we talk about I deserve this or I don't deserve this? And what showed up for me pretty quickly, even on that session, was a recognition that the language of deserving, not deserving, in some ways there's a kinship there between the notion of karma and the idea that we might have a background of memory, of imprinted material in our psyche, baggage to some extent. The thing is, I think there's a fair amount of misunderstanding with karma as well, because I think in the West we tend to take karma as a concept and use it as a kind of moralizing force. In other words, like if bad things happen to us, it's our karma. If good things happen to us, it's our karma. But there's this judgment laced into the concept that these things, that our karma can be bad or good, and that it's our fault. We're responsible for it. We deserve it. And what's interesting to me is looking at the way that someone like Sadhguru speaks about karma, and basically, if I can very haphazardly or very rudimentarily summarize my understanding of what he's saying, karma is not bad or good. Karma is not us getting what we deserve. Karma is simply imprinted memory over a very long time period that forms us, that forms who we are. It forms it's going to determine, or it's going to at least influence our behavior, and it's going to give us certain compulsions. But karma is basically like the laws of physics, in that what goes up must come down. There's a certain kind of work to be done as a consciousness, as an individual human consciousness expands. We have the imprint of prior of everything that's prior to this moment. We carry that into this moment. Our body is a form of karma. Our DNA is a form of karma. Everything that is part of the cosmic memory that makes us who we are is karma. So when I hear him speak about it, I mean, I read his book called Karma, which was just mind blowing. It was very, very informative. It really kind of reframed the concept for me in a whole new way. But doing that really kind of gives me a sense that the way that I now think about karma is more along those lines. It's more, even when I see things in my own life, for example, where I'm like, I would really like to change this pattern in my life. Having an understanding of the fact that karma is simply the residual impressions of all of my previous life, and if you accept the idea that we have had prior lifetimes, then there's thousands of years or more of imprinted impressions that inform us now, that inform me now. So it really is kind of like the laws of physics or the laws of evolution happening in my being, within my consciousness. So when I see a pattern that I want to change, the notion of karma in that sense simply gives me a picture, like a snapshot of the forces at play that I might have to work with, that I might have to wrestle with, things I might need to understand about myself in order to be able to make a change. But there's not a whole lot of I deserve this or I deserve that in that way of looking at things. And in the West, where we do sort of tend to think of, even our spirituality is laced with a kind of rewards and punishments foundation. Even our deities reward us for doing good and punish us for being bad. And that conceptual framework is very different than the one that I get from like a Sadhguru perspective on karma, because now what's happening to me and what I am doing actively are subject to a kind of judgment, and they become the basis for either good things happening to me in the future or bad things happening to me in the future. But the notion of deserving is tied in with this idea that this ego, this self, is kind of the center of my world. Not the center of the world necessarily, but myself is the center of my world. And so in a way, that language almost encourages an egocentric interpretation of life. Because the things that are happening aren't just the laws of physics imprinted upon the whole cosmos. They're things happening to me. And I'm not saying that necessarily, that conceptual shift is necessarily what everyone means when they use the language of deserving, but I am saying it encourages that. That's what I observed when I started to think about it. I was like, oh yeah, it really, the notion of deserving, well, you have to have a person, you have to have an entity who deserves or doesn't deserve. And since we're talking about, there's also something just in the word deserve. It's like I am owed something. if I deserve it, then I am somehow owed it. Not my karma makes this part of my life, but there's a debt in there somewhere. If I don't get it now, but I deserve it, well, then I have not been paid for my debt. The cosmic scales haven't been balanced. Now, again, some of that is sort of weirdly accurate, but the way that language turns what is otherwise simply a collection of impressions, a collection of memories, a collection of features of an individual consciousness into things that are being judged and debts to be paid. It sort of takes us in a different direction. Just in our thinking, not even in the discussion itself, but in our thinking about how we perceive events in our life. And I think where our discussion then went after that sort of reminded me that doesn't mean that there's never going to be an appropriate time to use that language, because there may be, if I'm working with someone, for example, where there's a self-worth issue or a sense of an ongoing sense of inadequacy or an inability to claim our power, which most of us have had some level of experience with that, feeling like we don't fully embody, fully inhabit, fully grasp our own power, it may be helpful to kind of claim that in the sense of I am worth it. I do deserve this. I want to be at this level. I am at this level, right? There's a sense of self-empowerment that may be a completely legitimate and vital step in our personal evolution, where that language is actually kind of helpful, and it gives us the little nudge to either claim something that is ours, or put a boundary up against something that we actually, in order to be healthy, need to create a boundary. So, in other words, my initial kind of critique of the word and of that way of thinking is not absolute. There are plenty of instances when it's a useful word, it's a helpful word. But I think what struck me initially about it was framing our life, framing our perception of our karma, of our ongoing self-expansion in terms of deserving and not deserving is probably going to take us off course overall. If that's kind of where we live, then we're going to go off course, because it's going to make things about us that aren't about us, and that's erroneous. That's not helpful. That's erroneous, and that means we're going to be in some way kind of missing what the cosmos is trying to say. So it was really interesting. I was really grateful that my student brought the idea up, brought the concept up for discussion, and it really did give me a little glimpse of it, not that this was necessarily all inherent in the word, but it gave me a little glimpse of a Western approach to life and morality and even divinity in some ways. And I think what I would maybe call a more Eastern approach, or a, just a sort of subjectivism, objectivism thing that I had never really seen in that way before, or that I hadn't quite clocked as being inherent in language in that way. So it was really interesting to unpack this a little bit, and it's interesting for me to kind of keep doing that now and think about what language do I use? When I have an issue in my life, I have things I'm wrestling with all the time. I notice an addiction in myself, right? There's a behavior that I seem to do unconsciously to a fault, and I keep doing it. What language do I use to address that? How do I talk to myself? What am I even looking for? Am I judging myself? Is it a good, bad? Is that what my mind does? Right? I mean, I can tell you intellectually, I know it's not good to judge myself, but that doesn't mean anything if it's happening at the emotional level before thought all the time anyway. Then that little language of like, oh, I shouldn't judge myself is just kind of like, it's like a streamer trailing in the wind behind a moving car. It's not doing much to change the situation. So really looking at the kind of language that we use internally to frame how things look and why things are happening to us and what we are doing. It feels important, and I was really grateful to my student for bringing this up and to kind of open my mind up to pursuing this this train of thought. So that's where I am today, folks. I'm wearing tie-dye because I went to a school event yesterday, and this is a shirt that Annalise made for me. So just realizing I'm very colorful on screen today, more than usual. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I will see you soon.